more questions are coming in. But I'd love to start with just using the lucky position I'm in to ask you a question that I've always wanted to ask you. Your answers across global stage have been very precise. They've been very witty. I'm always curious to know, have you always been this person? Or starting out when you were very young, was there a nervous you who was worried and not as bold and strong with your answers or as witty?
I think all of us were always nervous us. I think it grows with, with time. Uh, and look, when you first set out in the world, I envy the young people of today. I had, I first traveled on an aircraft when I was 22 years old because in those days, normal middle class people couldn't afford to travel by air.
True.
I first went abroad when I got a job in the Indian Foreign Service because those days people didn't take holidays abroad. So we knew much less about the world,
Yeah.
and even about ourselves, the exposure was relatively limited. So, and all of that in some ways reflected on your confidence levels.
Yeah.
But in a way, I was lucky. I first went to Moscow. Uh, my second posting was Washington. So when you've done, you've been thrown into big pools, you learn to swim. They are big, deep pools sometimes. I had, bosses who gave you the latitude, the leeway. You learned on the job. I had good colleagues, peer group or mentors, very important in life. I mean, to me still, there are a few people I remember almost like in any situation, even now, when others would look at me for mentorship, but I still remember my mentors.
Right.
So it grows on you. I mean, there isn't a particular moment, but let me tell you, two things. All of us started down this journey. And I tell people sometimes, we all remember the good moments, like the jumping with joy, even though it was before the result. But sometimes it's also useful to remember, the times you didn't make it, the numbers which were below what you hoped. So
True. I think it
that's
builds
part.
empathy
Sure,
towards
sure.
others. Thank you so much for that. And with that, I'm going to now read out the questions we've been sent. Here's the first one. How do you see the US presidential election outcome impacting Indo-US ties, especially given Prime Minister Modi's strong personal rapport with President-elect Trump?
What do you mean specially given? I mean, we have it taken care of. So, the Prime Minister was among the first three calls I think that President Trump took. And look, India, one, Prime Minister Modi has actually built rapport across multiple presidents. When he first came to DC, Obama was the president, then it was Trump, then it was Biden. So, for him, there's something natural in terms of how he forges those relationships. So that's helped hugely. And I think, the changes in India have helped as well. I mean, I know today a lot of countries are nervous about the US, okay? Let's be honest about it. We are not one of them.
Right. That's wonderful. That's great news. Lots of smiling faces in the audience. Sir, the next question that was sent in is this one. How do you see the reset in the global power dynamic play out as the balance of power shifts in some ways from the west to the east? And what are the likely intended and unintended consequences?
You know, look, yes, there is a shift. We are ourselves an example of the shift. Uh, if you look at our economic weight, you look at our economic ranking, you look at uh, even Indian corporates, their reach, their presence, Indian professionals, which I spoke about. So no question there is a rebalancing. Okay. And to my mind it was inevitable. It was inevitable because at one level because once these countries after the colonial period got their independence, they started making their own policy choices, then they were bound to grow. The part which is not inevitable is some grew faster, some grew slower, some grew better, and there the quality of governance and the quality of leadership came in. So there is in a sense therefore the constant and the variable. There is a trend towards a more diverse multipolar world. But there is also, a period when countries really surge ahead. I mean, it's a bit like would happen in the corporate world as well. And that's what you are seeing. But do remember one thing. The older, the Western economies, the older industrialized economies, they have not gone away. They still count, I mean, they are still today prime investment targets. They are big markets. They are strong technology centers. They are hubs for innovation. So let's recognize the shift, but let's not get carried away and kind of overstate it.
Right.
And distort our own understanding of the world.
Right. Thank you for that. Here's an interesting question. What's the one lesson from diplomats that you think business leaders need to learn?
Well, look, I think the real trick in diplomacy is to put yourself in the shoes of the other person. Not just in the shoes, actually in the
head.
In the head of the other person. That you train yourself. And that's, why do we learn a language? Why do we spend time, out of the country? Why do you fraternize? Why do you immerse yourself in other people's habits? Because ultimately you want to get in there. And if you can get in there, I mean, it's like, I mean, in a sense, the sports analogy, you're actually anticipating what the bowler is going to do because you are in the bowler's head. Or nowadays, from a Bumrah perspective, we're going to anticipate what a batsman is going to do because you're now in the batsman's head.
Right.
So this to me is a very, very important skill. It takes time, lot of experience, and some natural talent.
True. You have to be like a sponge. You have to have empathy, I guess. And also lot of the bookish stuff may not be reality, and you learn so much about culture and the way people think. Here's another question. How is PM Modi as a boss? Do you have early yearly appraisal sessions?
I have daily appraisal sessions. Look, I'd say, I mean, in a way, it's been for me pretty much, except for a year and a half, I was out of government, about 10 plus years continuously. In a way, I would say he's honestly a demanding boss, exacting boss. And I say that because he prepares, I mean, if you are discussing something, you have to come fully prepared. I mean, you have to know what you're talking about. You have to make your, argument or your case or whatever it is. You must stand your ground. You must have the data. So a second characteristic I would say is he's a very interactive boss. There are bosses who have made up their mind before you talk to them, or there are those who listen to you, give you a decision. His way of decision making is very much interactive. There is a certain
back and forth
out there. And I frankly, I say this in all honesty. I mean, I've enjoyed working with him because, he takes a call. He takes a call and then gives you that latitude, So, say, for example, I'm giving you, let us say, the Ukraine. Okay. Once, I mean, he took a call that we need to get people out, do what it takes, use the Air Force, use the civil aviation, talk to people, tell me what I have to do. If I have to make a phone call, I will do that. if you have to send ministers out there to, so, but then he gives you that operational freedom. I mean, he will monitor it. I mean, he will want a feedback. Okay, I mean, it's not like he's not tracking you, but he's not micromanaging you. He's not second guessing you.
Right.
So in that sense, I've actually, frankly, enjoyed the experience of this job.
That's a beautiful answer and lots of takeaways from that. Here's a wonderful question. Given your father's distinguished career, what are some of the formative values and principles that he instilled in you, and also what you may have absorbed over the years?
Well, look, my father, for those who may not be familiar, was also working in the government. And he was again, uh, uh, he was a very, he was not a typical government bureaucrat. He had a particular set of jobs which had a certain public activity. So he used to write, he would speak. Even when he was in the government, he would press his point of view. So the one thing certainly I carried away from him is to be a believer. I mean, if a job, work is not something you do from 9 to 5. I mean, and it's not something where you do your bit and it's somebody else's problem after that.
Right.
So, I mean, or you say in bureaucracy, it's not like the file left me and so he had a very strong beliefs on many issues. I mean, in those days, for example, the nuclear issue was very strong. A lot of it, he spent a lot of his time on defense related issues. So if you have to learn to kind of fight for your beliefs and your policy, convictions. But at a personal level, I think, look, we were a very typical middle class family with all the middle class habits which came. And I think many of those are very good habits. I mean, you live within your means, you do many things yourself, you
Reuse old cans.
well, among other things,
My
yes.
family. Yes, sir. But we're so short on time. I'm going to pick the last question. What's the atmosphere like when you're in the middle of intense negotiations with other countries? And what would be a few tips on negotiating?
Look, we go back to the diplomacy business.
True.
I've also learned from people in business, I must tell you. I mean, I've seen some really perceptive. I even had a short stint in business, if you know, between my civil service and my political. It was my gap year, you
True.
can say. So, if I were to share a negotiating tip, it would be to study whoever you are meeting as exhaustively as you can and bond with them as quickly as you can, so that when the tricky issues come, they already begin to like you.
Right.
So if you are meeting someone, okay, I've actually picked up knowledge of sports, for example. Most people in the world, by the way, if you really want them to be nice, you want drop guard, do sports. I'm now talking my generation, okay? So do sports, maybe do, films, music, food.
Right.
So the more you study them, more data you have, and often you don't have, you wing it as you go along. But today you get a lot about people. You know a lot about people you never met because the information is out there.
True.
So the more you can bond with them, then I find actually, you'd be surprised how many of our problems. Sometimes you people say, okay, look, I really can't do it, but this one time I'm doing it for you.
Right.
And they do that because somewhere you have made that effort to make that one-time difference.
Right. So beautiful. It's actually all about the human connection, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And empathy to the other. Thank you so much, sir, for your time, these wonderful chats and contributions.